Katelyn, if you could live anywhere where you don't already live and have never lived, where would it be?
I can't say New York.
Right.
I'm going to say the Italian Alps in the north of Italy, the Dolomites, which I visited a few years ago, and it was the most beautiful place
I haven't been, but I saw your pictures, and they were truly beautiful. So you'd like live in a little cottage. You'd really be...
like a cabin or a hut, and basically just act like I was in The Sound of Music.
Yeah. Would you?
What's your answer? Yeah, sheep, livestock.
I always say Paris. I feel like I've said that for so many years now that I'm like, but would I really? But I'll go with it. Continue to go with it.
New York, but better in a way.
There are some ways it is better. Like
smoking is more,
and the smoking.
Sad that's. Listen, I have not smoked.
I know.
For like coming up on a year.
But if you and I were in Paris together, we would definitely on those little cafe
culture.
with the chair, those cane chairs, and our like espresso, and then in the afternoon maybe a little rosé.
It sounds pretty darn perfect.
From Religion News Service, this is Saved by the City, a podcast from two Christian women living large and looking for home. I'm Roxy Stone.
And I'm Katelyn Beatty.
All right, let's see how well we know each other. Can we give a timeline of each other's various cities we've lived in? Bonus points if you can actually give the timeline, like the years, not just the places.
I feel reasonably confident about this with like a couple gaps in my knowledge about the actual timeline. So you grew up in Vona, Colorado. Mm-hmm. You went to school at Colorado State.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I don't know where Colorado State is.
Fort Collins.
Okay. And then after college, you worked for Group Publishing, also somewhere in Colorado.
Stayed in Fort Collins.
And then you moved to Oak Park to take a job at Christianity Today, and you were there from like not very long, like 2008, 2009.
Close. 2007 to 2008.
Okay.
I moved right before Obama got elected, and I was sad because I missed like the big to-do in Chicago.
Yeah.
Like the parade and everything.
Okay. Then you moved to Orlando to take a job at Relevant, and you were there until you moved to New York City in 2014.
Very good.
And you were there until 2017 when you moved.
I think that's right. I get a little like fuzzy on
You're
this
like,
one.
I blocked that out.
This one
2017, you moved to San Diego, and you came back to New York.
Via
Cleveland?
Yeah.
For like a year?
11 months. 11 months in San Diego, and then almost 11 months in Cleveland.
And then you returned to New York. And that was in 2019.
Yeah.
That's right, because you were sharing a bed with Jonathan Merritt for a while. Like when I was in New York in the summer of 2018.
I stayed at Jonathan's for like 6 weeks. Everything had blown up in San Diego, and I was in New York, and I was like, what am I going to do with my life? Where am I going to go? And I stayed at Jonathan's for like 6 weeks before I went to Cleveland.
Okay.
Which going to Cleveland was also just like to crash at a friend's for a while. And then it turned into 10 or 11 months.
Yeah. And then still in New York, moved to Brooklyn in 2024. Yeah.
I don't know if I can be as accurate for you, but I'm going to try.
Okay.
You grew up in Ohio, in Dayton.
We moved quite a bit before I was 8,
yeah, right,
because my dad was in the military. But I just say, yes, I grew up in Dayton.
And after high school, which I guess would have been like 2001-ish?
2002.
2002. You went to Calvin, so Grand Rapids, presumably for like 4 years.
Yes.
In 2006-ish, you moved to Chicago area, which is when we met. And you were there for 10 years?
I was there for almost 12, because even after I left CT, I lived there for another almost 2 years. before moving to...
So you moved to New York from there. Well, to Brooklyn from there. But you did a little stint here in Queens.
New York.
I know. Didn't you do like a little stint in Queens?
I did. I lived in Queens for a month.
Testing it out. Yeah. So 2018 to 2024 in Fort Greene, Brooklyn.
I was in Clinton Hill. For 2 years.
They're very close to each other.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They're all within a very close.
Clinton Hill.
Yeah.
And then you moved to Fort Greene to your bird nest.
Yeah.
And then you did Dayton for a few months with your parents, and now you're in Columbus.
Yeah.
Look at what good friends we are.
Go us. We get gold stars.
Do you have a favorite? I mean, or maybe a better question, since obviously New York was your favorite. What was your favorite and least favorite thing about each place?
I mean, my favorite thing about Glen Ellen was that is where I met friends who are still really good friends. My least favorite thing about it was like, definitely talked about this before, it was such a Christian bubble. It was homogenous in every way a place can be homogenous, and I started to just feel pretty alienated. My favorite thing about New York is that there is so much energy there.
Yeah.
It's a cliche, but New York feels very alive.
Yeah.
With people and also possibility, you know? Least favorite thing about living in New York, maybe the FOMO.
That's what I was going to say. We'll skip ahead to me and we'll just both agree. The FOMO is real here.
Say more.
Well, it's just like there's always something you could be doing, and there's always something your friends are doing, and you're getting invited to things. And then when you don't get invited to things, that feels weird.
I often felt in New York like, okay, I have this checklist in my mind of all the things I want to do, but you'll never get to the end of the checklist. Like there's always churn around shows and events or lectures or friend gatherings. Like, there's always something new, and that can feel really exhausting.
And pricey. You know, the wallet's not unlimited, and some of those things are expensive.
Yes.
What's your favorite thing about Columbus so far?
I like my neighborhood. I like my apartment. It has a lot of character, but it also has like a washer and dryer, which feels like such a novelty post New York. And that it's so close to family. But, you know, the flip side of FOMO is like feeling kind of bored.
Right.
I will say Columbus is known for really good happy hours.
Oh, hey.
Most restaurants have some kind of happy hour thing, and it's like $4 pints, $6 cocktails.
That's okay. Why did you lead with that?
It's wild. I mean, I'm like, wait, this is my whole bill? I mean, New York really does warp.
Oh my gosh. It so warps your sense of cost.
Yes.
Lots to say about my favorites in New York. I love the walking culture. It's the thing that I come back to a lot, where I just like so hard to get that anywhere else in the country. Even if you live somewhere where there's lots of beautiful things and fun things to do, like LA or San Francisco, it doesn't have the same walking.
No, because you just have to walk. You have to do it to do anything outside your apartment. So it's really easy to get in steps. Here it's like, I guess I'm going to go for a walk today to get in the steps.
Right. The walking is the thing.
Yeah.
San Diego, it was beautiful. One of the prettiest places maybe on earth. Certainly in America, it's gorgeous. Least favorite, it's just very sleepy and kind of homogenous. Cleveland,
well, it's Cleveland.
It's Cleveland. And I can say that. It actually reminds me a little bit of Pittsburgh. Like there's like that steel, like that old steel vibe. It's cool. Like it's one of those cities that's having a revival, a mid-sized city where people are like creating great pubs and great restaurants and all. So there was like actually a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed my friends who were there. I just was kind of lonely there. I only had the one friends. Yeah. And I wasn't there long enough to make better friends, which is something we're going to talk more about on this episode later with our guest today.
Who knows what it is to feel restless in a place and to wonder if the grass is greener in some other neighborhood or city or other country. But she also believes in the value of a long-term commitment. For many of us,
because we don't actually deal with the source of our distress, what usually ends up happening is that we leave a difficult situation, we open the door, and then we find ourselves in the exact same situation with another group of people or in a different career in a totally different town. And we're like, oh my gosh, how did this happen?
That's Lydia Sohn, author of Here, A Spirituality of Staying in a Culture of Leaving. Our conversation with Lydia is coming up later in the show. But first, Katelyn, I do want to try to make you feel a little better about leaving New York City.
Yeah.
I recently came across this reel on Instagram, and it's kind of a dagger to the heart of any New Yorker. So here.
We got to just play it.
Take a listen.
New York City is one of the greatest psyops of all time. It has been carefully marketed for decades as the ultimate dream city, the place where ambitious, creative, intelligent people go to make it. But in reality, it's a self-replicating illusion designed to trap people in a cycle of struggle, survival, and self-justification. It convinces people that suffering is necessary for success, that the stress, exhaustion, and loneliness prove that they're strong. It sells an identity so deeply that even when people are miserable, they won't leave, because leaving means admitting the dream was a lie. This is how the psyop works. They market New York as a status symbol. The media makes you believe that being in New York equals success, no matter how much you're struggling. They glamorize the suffering. People wear their stress as a badge of honor, brag about how much they're working, and romanticize the grind. They make you think leaving equals failure. This keeps people mentally trapped, even when they know deep down that they want to leave. It's not just a city, it's a mental prison disguised as freedom. Now that you see through it, you can walk away fully free. New York was never the dream. You are the energy, the power, the magnetism you thought New York would give you. You already had it. Now tell me, where do you take that power next?
I resonated with so much of this.
Okay, where's the lie? Right?
I think it's especially targeted to the experience of transplants. Like, I think it's a different phenomenon if you grew up in New York City or on Long Island, and that's just home.
Right.
Whereas I think the myth of moving to New York from some boring or sleepy place to find yourself or to push yourself creatively, to be around other creative, successful people, that is 100% true and very powerful. You have to justify the decision you've made to live there.
Right.
So then you get into a mental rhythm of needing to keep convincing yourself that it really is the best city in the world, and you wouldn't be happy anywhere else.
Yeah. And I think when your job doesn't require you to be here, it takes even more tying yourself in knots to convince yourself to be here. But I do feel a little bit of that like New York or nowhere feel still, where I love being here so much, and it feels like it's the energy of the city, it's the walking, it's all of the options, it's the kinds of people you meet, it's all of this. But I do find myself often enough asking, especially when I get out of the city, like, would I be a different kind of person? Like, would I be a more content person? Would I be a happier person? Would I be a more peaceful person? Would I if I was surrounded more by nature, if I was somewhere that felt less transient, even if I stayed in New York the rest of my life, I will have a churn of people around me because people just come and go all the time. Sometimes I wonder if like the life I've convinced myself I love in New York is actually in some ways working against the grain of like what would make me really happy or content.
Whoa. Well, I'm reporting from Ohio, but no.
You are so happy and so content.
Yeah, we can get to that. I think something that I found living in New York is that life started to feel like a series of cool and fun experiences.
Oh.
Which I am grateful for. Like, I'm thinking about the time that you and John and I went to, what was it called?
Sleep No More?
Went to Sleep No More. This wild 4-hour interactive theatrical experience. I'm like, there are very few places in the world you could have that experience. And it was really cool and memorable. And also, I don't want to center my life in any particular place as just the acquisitions of experiences.
Yeah.
And so I think, for you and John and Jonathan, a big part of why I imagine you are in New York, besides career stuff, is that your community is in New York. Like your church, your friends. It's like a pretty rare and special thing to have that, I think, especially at our age. So I think people are a better orientation in any place than the consumption of experiences.
I like how you put that. And I think you're right. Everywhere you go, there's ways to spend money. It's like a fashion show on these streets, you know? And you like,
listen, I all of a sudden got much cooler.
That is so right.
Which is the snobbiest thing to say.
For a few years.
Yeah, because in New York, it's hard not to feel like I can't keep up with the trends and the fashion and the youthfulness of the city. I just don't have the money or the time to be like at the top.
Right.
If that's your orientation.
I remember a friend telling me right after she left New York, she described herself in New York as very wanty. And I think about that a lot. It's very easy to be walking around the city and just like I want to go into that store and get something because the window shopping looks so cool. Or I want what the boots that person's wearing, or the bag that person's carrying, or I want to go to that show or eat at that restaurant.
My friends are talking about this show that they all saw. I need to go see it. I don't want to be left behind.
Right. So that is the part of New York that when I think about like the way that I like the kind of shaping I want a place to do to me, that's something I don't like about New York. But one of the things that I do feel very different in New York after almost 10 years than I did 2 years in or 3 years in, which sounds obvious, but I will say why. It's that like I have gone through so many seasons, and I mean like literal seasons. Like I have gone through Easter and Lent and Christmas, not in that order, many times with the same people. And there's something about that. There's something about being like, oh yeah, I remember when you gave up this for Lent 6 years ago. Or I remember this Christmas Eve, we went out to eat here after the service. And there's like something about both the liturgy, the literal liturgy, and then like the metaphorical liturgy of the seasons, and doing that in one place over and over again with a good number of the same people.
Yeah.
That I feel like has really formed me. New York is now the place that I have lived the longest of any place in my adult life. And I think that I feel that now. I do feel like I have roots here. But at the same time, I still think New York makes you feel transient. I don't think to myself, like, how could I participate in the life of this city? Like, should I get involved in, like, the city council? Or, not that I would.
Not right now.
Not right now. But it's like there's these ways that I don't, or like when I walk my street, I don't necessarily think like, what could make this street better? How could I invest in this very local neighborhood that I live in, you know? I guess a question I might have for both of us is we both have moved a lot. How do you think that's shaped you?
I mean, I'm probably lonelier. Or just like literally doing more things alone.
Right.
I think moving brings out this myth of my newer and better self is on the other side of this move.
Right. Like I could start over. I could start fresh.
Yeah. And I will say, moving to New York very much actually felt that way to me.
100%. It is such a different way of living.
Yes.
That it is more rattling than, say, moving from Denver to Columbus or something.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't begrudge anybody moving because they need a fresh start or they need a new perspective or they want to grow or be challenged in a specific way. But we have this, I think maybe our generation and younger compared with previous generations has grown up with the like upward mobility that the goal is to always be getting the better job, making more money, having the bigger house, climbing. And that part of that is being ready and willing to move for the bigger and better thing. Like that it would in some sense be failure to stay where you've grown up or where you've been for 10 or 15 years.
like a stagnancy or a complacency.
Yeah, like to stay in one place is to not grow. And I think that is false in a lot of ways.
Sometimes I regret moving so much and not committing a little more to a place or to a people. And I wonder, like, what would it have looked like to have never left Fort Collins, you know, or to have never left Orlando? And I can kind of see what it would look like because some of my friends didn't, and they're there, you know, and they own homes, which might have been nice, you know, and they have kids and they have a life that maybe 20 years ago I wasn't ready for. And so I was like, I'm out, you know? And now I think, oh, that looks nice. You know, like
some of this has got to be developmental, right?
Probably. I've realized that literally every time I've moved, my friends have gotten younger. And I have moved every time right about the time when my friends in that place started having kids. So like I've never like been friends with people who had young kids in that way of like really close friendships. I haven't seen my closest friends' kids grow up. That makes me sad. Like I haven't really been part of their lives.
Yeah.
And maybe that's kept me stilted in a different way. Like, you know, if we worry that staying in a place would make you stagnant, maybe moving a lot and never having that longevity or having that commitment sort of stilts your maturity.
Yeah, I'm willing to entertain that possibility. That Instagram reel ended on a note that I thought was really good, which is, by the way, one of the top...
It's a little woo-woo, Katelyn.
Listen, I'm in my woo-woo era. We've established this. By the way, one of the top comments was, this AI bot is definitely from the Midwest. I was like, yeah, that's right on. But basically, the AI bot says something like, you go to New York in search of this power or this energy. And in fact, you already have that within you. And it's a matter, like whatever you're looking for, you can actually cultivate within. And I think there's something to that. Not to sound too woo-woo, but like part of growing up is maybe finding the things that we're looking for by cultivating something inward rather than seeking them without.
All right. That's actually a good segue to Lydia, because this is some of what she talks about.
Yes.
So let's throw it to our sponsors who make all this possible, and then we'll get to Lydia.
Let's do it.
Religion News Service is an independent, award-winning source of global reporting on religion, spirituality, culture, and ethics.
From here to there and everywhere in between, RNS covers religions both foreign and familiar.
We've been having some lively conversations over on our Instagram these days. I feel like it's been a fun, like, continuation of the podcast. So check us out at Saved by the City on Instagram.
We'd also love to hear your feedback and ideas for future guests and topics. Y'all, we're talking about doing an atonement episode right before Good Friday. It's going to be spicy. Is that the right word when we're talking about the cross? Probably not. It's going to be fiery. It's going to be a bloody good time. That's sorry. Oh, no. That's bad. I'm sorry.
Today, we're delighted to be joined by Lydia Sohn. Lydia is a minister and a writer. She currently serves as the senior pastor of Walnut United Methodist Church, and she's the author of Here, A Spirituality of Staying in a Culture of Leaving. Hi, Lydia.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here, and congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
One of the things that, as we've sort of talked about in the past too, committing to a place or a people can feel sort of constricting.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you get at in the book is a little bit how that kind of commitment is actually can be liberating.
Yes, totally.
Can be this good that maybe we might actually think of it as, I don't know, being stuck. So talk to us a little bit about how that commitment to a sense of place and people can actually be liberating.
Well, I think decision fatigue is a real thing, right?
That's
it's like
true.
When we scroll through social media or we look at job opportunities and we're given so many choices, it's exhausting to constantly consider a different place and a different community that we could be with. So it's liberating in the sense that it's energy saving to just remain committed where you are. But it's also limitless. It's limitless when we commit to people and places because our relationships are always moving on. The way that a relationship looks to anybody, a career, a city, to a person, it's always in motion, evolving. So that's the beauty of what I describe as spiritual alchemy, is that we're a lot less stuck and relationships are a lot less static than we initially judge them to be. And I feel like as millennials growing up in the generation that we have, with so many choices and the digital world opening things up for us, I think that sometimes we're a little too quick to leave behind something that had a lot more possibility than we gave it credit for.
Yeah, I think you're getting at this attitude we've inherited, which is that to grow and evolve as a person, we have to be on the move.
Yes.
Because if we stay in one place, if we stay with one person, if we stay in one church or in one community, we're kind of stuck in who we are.
It's this entrenched belief. Yes.
So what do you mean when you say spiritual alchemy? What is that vision?
Yeah. When we are so quick to leave, we rob ourselves of seeing the divine in our lives. That shows up in the most mundane ways. And we rob ourselves of how God shows up for us in difficult circumstances, right? When we're so quick to leave, we don't see the miracles or how God is guiding us or helping us. And then for many of us, because we don't actually deal with the source of our distress, what usually ends up happening is that we leave a difficult situation, we open the door, and then we find ourselves in the exact same situation with another group of people or in a different career in a totally different town. And we're like, oh my gosh, how did this happen? Right? And there's a saying like, you can go anywhere, but wherever you go, you always take yourself along. Instead of bringing your baggage wherever you go, what if you were satisfied anywhere? And so wherever you are, you can be content. After practicing the spirituality and seeing the miracles for myself, I can go anywhere and know that I'm going to be happy for the most part, you know?
Yeah, you talk about that at various points in the book, that part of like this commitment to a place and to a people is recognizing that you have a lot of responsibility for your own happiness instead of like constantly looking outward to either a new place, a new adventure, a new people to bring that happiness to you or to generate that happiness within you or to blame someone else for taking that happiness from you. So talk a little bit about kind of, you mentioned some different spiritual practices and some different ways that like you can actually kind of practically take responsibility for your own happiness.
Basically, how do we be happy without seeking the shiny thing?
A practice that I do every day is a daily examine, which is like noticing the movement of God in my everyday life. And when I lead participants through this practice, it's so interesting that when they share with one another how God shows up in their lives, it's never a glamorous, adventurous moment, right? And if you've ever practiced a daily examine, like you have seen for yourself that the moments when we are feeling God in the most profound ways are in the most mundane of moments. So spiritual practices, journaling, therapy, like what is it that I'm contributing, you know? And my marriage, we've been married for almost 15 years and it has not been like this rosy, peachy relationship, but it is not the same relationship it was when we first started dating. I mean, it is like a dramatically different relationship. Same people, totally different relationship because of my own reflecting and like thinking, how did I say that in a way that triggered his response, right? And through the years, we've just like changed together in the most miraculous of ways. So taking notice, self-reflection, spiritual practices, therapy, journaling, all of it. I think those are the ingredients, just like becoming a better person, right?
But they sound kind of boring. No, I think some of this is also perhaps life stage. I mean, I sense that we're all of the elder millennial cohort. Yes. And I can very clearly track some time in my 30s where I realized, like, some of your idealistic expectations about what your life is going to be like and what life feels like as an adult becomes tempered by life. And you realize, actually, maybe it's not so much changing jobs, changing a relationship, changing an apartment, but accepting the constraints and limitations of your current reality and figuring out how to be happy and grow in that space. I feel like that has to be some kind of like human developmental shift.
Oh, totally.
That is much more rare when you're in your teens or 20s and you've been told, like, no, what it means to be a successful, happy American is to always be willing to drop things if a new and better opportunity comes along.
Yeah. I love that you say that. When we're young, it's healthy for us to think about possibilities, right? It's healthy for us to look all over the country to different colleges that we might want to go to or different people that we want to hang out with, right? Especially if we grew up in a very monogamous kind of culture. And there are also a lot of communities and people in the Bible where wandering and exploration and adventures are so essential for them discovering their identities and coming back to recommit to their people. And so going out and exploring and discovering oneself and trying new things isn't opposed to a spirituality of stability. It actually can strengthen it. And I know it did for me too.
Obviously, you alluded to this earlier, so let's come back to it. There are times and reasons for leaving a place or a community. There's obviously like dangerous or times when it's healthy or better to leave. You know, it's not always wrong or bad to leave. What is your advice for like discerning when to leave, when to stay? Like, what are we weighing when we make that kind of a decision?
Yeah. I like that you use the word discerning because that's exactly what it is. It's a process of discernment. Discerning comes from the Latin word discernere, which means like going through, filtering out, right? Like seeing the wheat from the chaff, like very clearly. And it takes time for the clarity to come to surface. So the first thing that I will say is I like to think of gardens, and they can't grow if they're not rooted. In an ideal situation, these flowers or trees are flourishing. But the thing is, they have to be rooted and planted in an environment where they can even flourish. So I don't give an equation or a formula for like when to leave, right? Because one congregant will tell me that they're in a toxic relationship, and then I see it clearly and I talk to the other person and it's not a toxic relationship. And another congregant thinks that they're in a very healthy relationship, but it's actually a very toxic relationship, right? I even try to refrain from using the word toxic because it's too easy. But what I'm trying to say is that there's no formula or an equation. But what I'll say is, as one goes through a process of discernment by themselves and then also in community, one will be able to figure out if they're in an environment where they're able to flourish. A second thing that I talk about in my book is my own story of leaving a really big job in San Diego. I was promoted really quickly to a large church at a young age as a senior pastor in San Diego, one of the most ideal cities in the country, and I did not want to be there. It wasn't abusive. I was totally in a landscape, in an environment where I was flourishing, and I didn't want to be there. Like every single day, I had to beg God to help me. And that's when I had to figure out like different kinds of leaving, like which kind of leaving is not good and which kind of leaving is a sign that I can leave. And one way I figured out is a kind of leaving that will open us up to a different chapter where it feels good is if the leaving feels like we're coming home instead of escaping. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think when we leave a situation to escape without having like dealt with whatever is going on in the best manner, we're going to go to a different situation that brings up the same kinds of conflicts. Mm-hmm. But if it's like a peaceful kind of leaving where it feels like I'm going home, then that's a really good sign that we're on a good path.
I want to circle back to something you just said, which is that you don't use the word toxic, or you try to avoid using the word toxic.
Too easy.
Anymore.
It's so easy.
Why is that? Say more about why you try to avoid that word.
It's such a common word in our vocabulary right now. And even like therapists are complicit in the use of that word. And it shuts down the conversation.
Right.
It shuts down self-reflection. It automatically casts people into black and white roles. Usually we're the victim. And the person or the situation or the environment that we don't like is the perpetrator.
We're never the toxic ones.
No, we're never the toxic ones, right? Isn't that interesting? So I just feel like it inhibits our growth when we use that word because it stops us from reflecting about our own responsibility. It takes away our own power, our agency, our creativity, our resourcefulness. And so I like to just throw it out altogether and use different language so that we can actually have a productive conversation.
You talk about the importance of not just staying in a place, but actually investing in a place that, you know, we can live in a particular place for a certain amount of time, but kind of remain a visitor to that place. And I think there were times when I certainly felt that in New York City, that the city itself is so big and vast, it can feel hard to know how to commit to that particular place. So what does it look like to actually take responsibility for a place or a community?
Yeah. So one of my chapters includes the work of Wendell Berry. And I once heard a podcast interview with him where he said, in this market economy, we move for our jobs. So I'm going to go wherever the jobs are. But what if our living patterns were not determined by our jobs, but determined by our commitment to communities and the land? And that just like blew my mind of how our world could be so different if we lived based on where we wanted to give to rather than where we can take from.
Yeah, I think about my parents and just living in one place for all of their adult life and like getting involved in so many different things and like school system and civic duties and, you know, like and being on like the cemetery board, like just all these ways that the community grew, that they invested. And also just thinking about like these histories of these relationships that last like 60 years, you know, or 70 years and how different that is.
Yeah. And when we realize that our individual destinies are tied up with the destinies of the land and that community, all of a sudden our orientation towards it and our energy towards it is so radically different. And we like volunteer our time to be on boards. We start like thinking about how our land is polluted and like think about ways to make it look more beautiful. We give our creativity.
Bring this back to church for us. Like, what does this look like in terms of a commitment to a church community as well? And how does that kind of run in parallel or mirror what we're talking about here?
So my brother-in-law, who's just a year older than me, shared something that I thought was so insightful. So he's also an elder millennial, like the rest of us on this podcast. He's a human rights lawyer that works all over the world, and he has friends all over the world. And he once shared with me, I have a lot of friends, but I don't have community. And I was like, whoa. He struck something that I think so many millennials and younger resonate with. We have lots of friends, but we lack community. And for me, as a minister and as a Christian, the place where I have consistently found community, where I know that they're going to take care of me and I'm going to take care of them, where it's diverse, where we feel a sense of belonging, where some of us don't even feel like we fit in, but fitting in is different from cultivating a sense of belonging. Mm-hmm. That has always been church for me. You know, it's like this clock every single Sunday. That's where you go. And I think that that's kind of one of the ways that we practice our spirituality of stability. And there's also a ton of research about happiness and how people are happier when they're embedded in communities of care, right? Instead of just having these like one-off friends like here and there. Those are good too, but it's different when we're embedded in communities of care, even with people that we vote differently from. I hate to say that, right?
Well, shucks. Yeah. Well, on that note, no, I think obviously that's right.
It is.
And the distinction between a collection of friends across the country versus a community. And some of the communities that are the richest, where we feel the most belonging, are not necessarily the ones where we hand-selected everybody to be in it.
Yeah.
In the way that we can kind of cultivate different friendships in our lives. It's kind of like, well, this is the community that I find myself a part of. And it wouldn't necessarily be like exactly how I wanted it, but that's precisely why it cultivates growth and changes us. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Lydia.
Thank you.
Congratulations and good luck with book launch and all the rest.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. All right, Katelyn, what are you most looking forward to in Columbus this spring?
I'm looking forward to more walks because, you know, an Ohio winter is pretty bleak. I will say, no matter where you live, seasonal allergies stay the same. This is the first week that I've started to feel itchy and sneezy and watery.
I can hear it in my voice.
Here we go. How bad is it in New York? I know that it was really bad there a couple of years ago.
It hasn't really started.
Okay.
I've just noticed, like, in the mornings I wake up like more stuffed up and kind of I can hear it in my voice, but I'm not feeling it yet.
Well, it's blowing eastward.
It's coming.
What are you looking forward to in New York this spring?
I'm excited. So we live in our new place not far at all, like a 10-minute walk to the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens, which I've never visited. And I'm excited to have such easy, close access to those. And I think you can get like a membership. So I'm excited about that.
It's a pretty place for sure.
Saved by the City is a religion news service production. The producer is Jay Woodward, and the consulting editor is Paul O'Donnell. We get production assistance from Julia Wyndham.
Chaz Rousseau put together our look, and Martin Fowler wrote our theme music.
We are Roxy Stone
and Caitlin Beatty.
Thanks for listening.